Hi, everybody. I thought I would just cover a little bit of the chapter for you so that you'd have an idea about what to expect tomorrow. Um, so, tomorrow's class this week is on omitted variable bias. And omitted variable bias is an important concept in econometrics. And this chapter will cover everything we need to know about omitted variable bias. So I think you want to take it really seriously, and we'll cover, basically what's in the chapter now. So first things first is a definition of what omitted variable bias is. We have a two-part test for omitted variable bias. Omitted variable bias arises when the expected value of the error term, conditional on the included variables in the regression, is not equal to zero. And that happens if other factors are confounders are correlated with the explanatory variable in X and also affecting the outcome. So the two-part test is that, um, let me get here's our two-part test. Uh, there's a likely omitted variable correlated with the included X variable, and this omitted variable independently has a causal effect on the outcome Y. Independently here is a key word. Independently here means separate from the effect of X. So we could think of an omitted variable Z that has an effect on the outcome Y. It might also be correlated with X. So independently is the key word here. Your grade on the midterm affects your final grade, and your grade on the problem sets affect your final grade. So you could say, oh, your grade on the midterm affects your final grade, and there's an omitted variable, your grade on the quizzes that affects your final grade. But the effect of the grade on the quizzes is not independent of the effect of your midterm grade, since both of them are being determined by how much you study and what your abilities are. So that word independent there is a key word. The variable z, the omitted variable that we're thinking about, really has to be something else, another variable that's not really closely related to the x variable, but is correlated with the x variable. Um, so we'll think about omitted variable bias in the single variable regression case. You can talk about it too in the multiple variable regression case, but it's much easier to understand the nature of the bias and the direction of the bias in the single variable regression case. So let's go right away and look at the Mincer earnings equation relationship. So we have the log of earnings determined by education. Our assumption is that the errors are uncorrelated with education, but of course there's many uh, omitted variables that could be correlated with education that could also affect earnings. For example, your ability, your general aptitude, your ability to master complex ideas. That's probably correlated with how many years of education you have. Schooling rewards that kind of ability, and so it's more enjoyable to stay in school if you enjoy learning new things and mastering complex ideas. And mastering complex ideas itself is rewarded in the workplace. So your ability, we can think of it as an omitted variable, determines both your education and independently determines your earnings. Education determines earnings too, but so does your ability. Now, since ability and education are correlated, we'd have omitted variable bias in a regression that just had education as the explanatory variable. And the reason is intuitive. It looks like education's having an effect on earnings, but because education and ability are correlated, it could be that it's ability that's having the effect on earnings. And that's our bias that comes whenever we have an omitted variable. So We can see this with some figures, right? Education's affecting earnings, abilities affecting earnings, but abilities also correlated with education attainment. We can think about other omitted variables, and I go through in the chapter 4 cases of omitted variables that you might think of that are associated with education and that also cause the outcome. And this is what we'll look at tomorrow. So I wanted to give you a little bit of flavor of what we're looking at, maybe get you to be reading this chapter before we before you actually watch the lecture that I'll present.